So hi, I'm Dr. Sallyann from Freudenberg, but please, everybody just calls me Sal. I feel like I should have a lab coat and be a crazy scientist with a name like that. So just a bit of background. I've been in the tech world, 30 years or so now. I've done a whole wide range of roles. I've been a developer. I've been a systems analyst, designer, business analyst, a project manager, and I've been pretty firmly in the kind of lean agile space for the past 15 years or so, including my PhD, which is on the psychology of collaborative software development.
Hey, Jay, is Jay back there?
Oh. Do you want to use my laptop? Apologies. I'll just keep going while you...
Yeah, we're trying to get speaker notes up on the laptop.
Should we just do it without? Shall I borrow my notes? Yes, please, Jamie, that would be amazing.
Hello, how may I help you today with nerding services?
Jamie and Lion, folks. They're up next.
So, I'll just keep going. Oh, you can see my notes. That's why I don't need to talk. That'd be great. I'm here to talk about inclusive collaboration, and I first got interested in that about 5 years ago when my son got diagnosed as autistic. And I went straight into kind of fact-finding out mode and read everything I could find and went to see people speak. In fact, I saw Jamie speak. The more I found out, the more I thought, actually, a lot of this stuff seems kind of familiar to me. And there are a lot of things I thought, that seems like me. These things are describing me. And I'm lucky, my sister is a clinical psychologist, my younger sister, so I phoned her and said, Tess, Zach's got this diagnosis. Do you think there's a chance that I might be autistic? And she paused a little bit and very politely said, well, I don't know if you'd get a formal diagnosis, but you've certainly got some autistic traits, as she called them then. And since then, I've done more kind of looking into it. I kind of self-identify as autistic, and I've done some work with a world expert on women who are autistic, and she's pretty sure I'm autistic too. So that's my autistic credentials. Okay, so I'm going to backtrack from all of that for a little minute first to talk about why this stuff's important for everybody, why building an inclusive environment is important outside of neurodiversity, just in general terms, and then I'm going to zoom into neurodiversity and talk about that afterwards. So, sometimes we talk about IT as knowledge work, and I don't know, I don't like that very much, because it sounds like it's a bit production line, like I'm the first person in the knowledge conveyor belt, I'll put some knowledge into the product, then I'll pass it to you, and then you'll put some of your knowledge in, and then the next person will put some of their knowledge in, and in the end we'll get an amazing product, right? And we all know that that's not really how it works. And that actually, the work that we do is very creative. And I know there's been a little bit of debate about, how creative it actually is. But this is from a classic textbook. This is part of a definition of creativity. Creativity is the tendency to generate or recognize ideas, or alternatives, or possibilities that might be useful in solving problems. And I don't know about you folks, but that sounds like the kind of stuff that I do every day when I'm working in tech. And because I'm interested in creativity, I asked on kind of social media and people I met, what has an effect on how creative you are? What in your workplace can affect your ability to be creative or not? And I've called these things factors applying tension to creativity. Because it so happens that some of these things are helpful up to a certain point where they become difficult. And the level to which they're helpful or unhelpful. Oh, I thought I was being really loud. The level to which they're being helpful or unhelpful will differ according to each person, according to, a particular time of day for that person, what else is going on around them or whatever. So some of these are quite surprising. So some people said, you know what, deadlines. Deadlines is quite a good one. If I haven't got a deadline at all, I could procrastinate forever. I find it quite difficult to even be creative. Right? I need some tension from a deadline. Other people might work better with, hardly any deadline at all. But we know if that deadline's too pressing, then that stifles our creativity and gets in the way. So there's this kind of bell curve that's different for different people, it's different for people at different environments, different days. There's a kind of bell curve in terms of how helpful these factors are. And there are heaps of them, and I'm not going to talk about all of them because there are loads. Process, right? If I've got a bit of a structure of a process that's sort of lightweight, that can help me. Right, but if I've got too defined a process, then that might stifle my creativity. Distractions. Sometimes that can help, right? Something will happen, it will distract me, and then, another, a thought will come up that I hadn't even kind of been aware of before. Or it will take me away from directly thinking about the problem and give me an opportunity to incubate a solution. People and social stuff. Movement, that kind of like, be at your desk and look like you're working. Look busy. Or, if you need to stroll about, go for a walk, that's fine, you can do that, if that will help you problem solve. Brilliant. Repetitive physical activity we know helps with creativity. Stuff like juggling or running or dancing or even just walking about. I stride about a lot, by the way. The sensory environment. Multitasking, politics. Rhythm, like some people are really creative and able to work better in the mornings or late at night. Their physical state. Ooh. Tools, whether you're collaborating, whether it's too serious or whether there's a load of enforced fun that's kind of getting in the way of your thinking. Tidiness, messiness, culture, routineness, whether you've had a good rest and lots of sleep or not. Sometimes people are more creative if they've pulled an all-nighter. Emotions, there's all of these things that are relevant of your neurology affect how creative you can be. And yet, in this industry, I still see environments like this. One size fits all. Okay? I've cheated a little bit, this is actually a newsroom rather than, but I've definitely been in buildings like this for tech companies, right? Where it's either exclusively open plan, everybody, noisy and bright, or exclusively the other way, and everyone's got their little cubby hole that they sit in, and there's no ability to tailor the environment according to what's going to be best for you, or even what's going to be best for you at that time on that particular day. And it doesn't make any sense at all. Why aren't we offering quiet spaces like the amazing quiet room here? Why aren't we offering alternatives? Why aren't we providing safe and forgiving environments that pay attention to people's varying needs without actually kind of singling people out? She's disappeared. So I had a photo here. I don't know why it's disappeared. Maybe it's disappeared into somewhere between my laptop and Dropbox and back down to Chris's laptop. I had a photo here of a friend of mine. She's called Zoe. She works for an organisation where we did a big cultural transformation piece, right? And they made the offices all open plan, and they installed new lighting and funky furniture. And Zoe got such bad migraines from the new lighting that her team made her a visor out of Post-it notes, because even when she was wearing her sunglasses, she couldn't cope with the lighting. So those are the kind of environments we're creating for people, right? This is brilliant as well. So my friend Catherine, who is the co-founder of Inclusive Collaboration, took this photo because this poor lady here had to make a space between two movable whiteboards to get some peace to work on her stuff. to make an environment in which you could work. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to work in an environment where we have to go to these extremes to be able to function. Yes, Jamie? There you go. So Jamie had to sit under his desk to create an environment that was helpful for him to write his code too. And these people, these are just people in our workplace struggling with the environments that we provide. And we know, in general terms, that diversity is really helpful in teams. And I know I'm not going to focus on gender diversity or age diversity or all of the cultural diversity or any of the other kinds of diversity that are out there, although they're all obviously really, really important. This is one of my favourite studies on diversity. So in this study, 2 teams were given a crime to solve. And one team, and they were fraternity groups, which probably means a lot more to all of you than it does to me, because I had to kind of go and look up what fraternity groups actually were. But my understanding is they're groups of people that are kind of like social, have social similarities. I think in this particular university, they were kind of Greek kind of groups. So they help each other understanding, social norms, they support each other, they do all kinds of amazing stuff. So they took 2 fraternity groups and they gave them this problem to solve. Who committed the crime? Same information that they both had, right? And one of the groups, they kept the group intact all the way through the exercise. The other group, partway through the exercise, they changed the composition of the team and put in 3 people from a completely different group into this team. And that team significantly outperformed the other team. So they did way, way better. They were absolutely correct in the kind of setup and who committed the crime. And the interesting thing for me about this study is that when the 2 groups were asked at the end, how do you think you did? The group with the diversity said, we don't think we did very well. The group with the diversity said collaboration was kind of tricky for us. It was sort of hard for us to work together, but they did much better than the group that said, yeah, we were great. It was easy for us to work together. It was all the same. So it seems like the carefulness that was needed in the collaboration actually helped the team to become more successful. And I think that's fascinating, especially as sometimes an agile coach, well, the tendency is, to want people to skip out of collaborative sessions, happy, all liking each other and all that kind of stuff. But actually, I think some of the most important collaborative sessions that I've coached have been where actually there's been adversity, there's been different views, we've had difficult conversations to have. And we've maybe not all walked out of there gleaming and smiling, but we've done something really amazing. And yet, so we know this about diversity, and there's so much evidence, and yet I still hear companies say this. We recruit for cultural fit. I come from Somerset in England, and it looks a lot like that. So this cow's like, you're not like us, you can't be part of our herd. And when I balk at people saying we recruit for cultural fit, they go, no, Sal, you misunderstood. When I say cultural fit, I don't mean that we just employ white, middle-class males in their late 20s to early 40s. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's not. And so I'll say things like, well, what do you mean? And they'll say things like, well, what I mean is I want a flexible team player who's cross-functional and likes a challenge, which actually is still a masked, I want someone just like me. we're going to end up with a homogenous monoculture with a lack of diversity. And that very lack of diversity could easily diminish our success, as we've seen in many studies now, and ultimately our competitive advantage. And it plays right into some of our cognitive biases. And I'm just going to mention 4. I don't know if you've seen, there's a whole wheel of cognitive biases. It's really, really beautiful, actually, on Wikipedia that you can go and look up. Has all the cognitive biases on. I recommend you don't look at it for too long, because if I look at it for too long, I can't function afterwards, because I'm all kind of full of how biased I am about all the things. But the biases that I think most pertinent to the problem of recruiting for cultural fit are these. So one is salience. And salience is the fact that we concentrate. It's very difficult. If we see something right in front of our face, it's very difficult for us to get past that and look at other aspects. And that's true for a person as well. So maybe if someone comes in for an interview and they look different, or they speak differently, or they behave or something that feels a little bit off-key, it's very hard for anybody to get past that and look at the other aspects that we might want to know. Of course we have in-group bias. I don't think that's news to anybody, right? We will favour people in our group, whatever we perceive that to be, as opposed to people outside of that group. And I think if we're conscious of that, just that consciousness can help. I think even more fascinating, there's this thing called out-group homogeneity bias. And this is our bias that our group is really diverse. It's the world out there. Everybody else that's not. So, for example, I don't know, the example I usually give is, if I came home from doing this talk and I went to a PTA meeting, right, Parent-Teacher Association meeting, with a bunch of other mums with the kids that go to school with my children. We might sit around and go, well, isn't it fascinating? We're all so different, us mums, aren't we? Look, Sal's just been off to speak in Atlanta. I'm a stay-at-home mum. Somebody else, I don't know, is a lawyer. Somebody else works in a supermarket. Yada, yada, yada. We've got all this wide range of jobs and interests and things that we love doing. But isn't it weird? Because men, they all like football and beer, or I don't know, something, right? We see the diversity in our own group, but we don't see it in the group that we're not in. And that's a known cognitive bias. We also have blind spot bias. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know what she's talking about, I'm not like that. That's not me, I'm not biased. That is blind spot bias. So blind spot bias is the inability to see our own biases. And that's a known cognitive bias too. Okay, so I'm just going to pull apart I want a flexible team player who's cross-functional and likes a challenge for you for a minute, and look at what would happen if we looked for something who was the complete opposite to that. If we looked at an inflexible non-team player who wasn't cross-functional and didn't like a challenge, right? I've just made it kind of difficult for myself, really, because you're probably thinking, why would I possibly want somebody like that? Well, what could be the benefits of that? What's the benefit of employing somebody who's not flexible? Well, maybe they're hard to convince, so you've got to really think your arguments through when you're talking to them. Maybe they help you avoid confirmation bias, which is another bias, right? And what confirmation bias does is, if we have a belief in a fact being true, as information filters towards us, we will filter out the stuff that doesn't agree with what we already believe to be true. And we know that confirmation bias exists amongst many of the kind of interesting studies about it. I like the ones, this is a bit macabre, but this is the right room for being macabre, because apparently this was once a cadaver auditorium. Are the ones where they look at what happens in aircraft crashes. So what they find, there's a really famous one actually, where one of the engines failed on a flight, and they didn't know which one. And as they throttled down, one side rattled. So they went, that's the one that's broken. And there was loads and loads of contrary evidence suggesting it was the other one that was broken. But once the pilot had decided that that rattle indicated which one was broken, that was it. The contrary evidence was never looked at. Eventually, he turned off the healthy engine, and there was a plane crash, and everyone died. So we know that the confirmation bias is absolutely a thing. What about if we had somebody who wasn't a team player? Why would we want that? Well, this is very sporadic. It would avoid group polarization. You know, the fact that we'll all kind of we'll get kind of groupthink if we work together too much. So if you've got somebody who's not a team player, maybe they're going to stop us doing that. Maybe they're going to go, are we really sure this is the right direction that you're all so invested in going in? Is this the right product? Is this the right way of working? It's going to avoid the risky shift as well, and that's even worse than group polarization, because what that means is if you get a group of people together with similar beliefs, they'll get more extreme. So if you get people who are moderately right-wing and you put them in a group together and you get them to talk about politics, they will make decisions that are incredibly right-wing. Same left-wing. So it doesn't work with one or the other. If you get a group of people who are moderate believers in something and you put them together, you can get this risky shift. And they might be the people who come up with maverick ideas. So why would you want somebody who's not cross-functional? Well, maybe they have deep encyclopedic knowledge of something. And somebody who doesn't like a challenge might be the person who highlights risks for you. Might be the person who's careful and thinks everything through. Okay. So talked a little bit about general diversity, and now I'm going to delve into neurodiversity. So as far as I'm aware, the term neurodiversity came out of the autism community, and it's the idea that rather than things like autism, ADHD, selective dyspraxia, etc., being disorders that we should cure and stop, they're actually really, really normal variations in the human genome that have always been there, and that have, in fact, probably helped us evolve as a species. And there's loads of empirical... So, in case you're thinking, what's that got to do with me? There's loads of empirical evidence about a link between, particularly autism, because that's what I'm going to focus on, and IT. And I don't think there's one absolutely conclusive study, because I think it's an area where it would be very difficult to do a conclusive study. But if you look, there's a wide range of studies that do suggest that there's this link between autism and the world of tech. And even if you don't believe that, still, current rates, I think in the US, say 1 in 68 people is autistic. So for sure, you have likely got somebody in your team or in your organization, okay, if it's not you. So why would you want an autist in your team? Why would you want an autistic person to work on your team? Well, this is where there's a bit of a health warning on all this, because sometimes people say, you know, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. These are sweeping generalizations, and I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to, as much as I can, pull them into my own stories about me, rather than kind of generalizations. There's some thinking that some autistic folk have, particularly those that are drawn into IT, have really good visuospatial thinking. And what that means is they're really good at laying out where things are in space. Now, in addition to that, when I was having some tests to do with autism, I did some work on synesthesia, and one of the forms of synesthesia I've got is concept to spatial, which makes loads of sense, because I can remember things like solving database problems where I could see all these towers and I could kind of walk past them, and the joins were these little walkways and all that kind of stuff. And I can tell you right now that next Wednesday is precisely there. So this ability to manipulate mental images is something that can be really, really helpful in tech. And one of my favorite pieces of research on the psychology of programming is by Marion Petrie and Alan Blackwell in the UK. And they asked expert designers to talk continually when they were solving really, really tricky problems. And what they found is, after a while, they talk, and then they go quiet. And when they went quiet, the researchers would say to them, "What's happening now?" Which must have been really, really annoying. But they found that they were expressing these amazing mental images of what was going on, and they even surprised themselves when they were trying to do it. So maybe that's something you can try. And they were saying things like, oh, it's like all these machines moving in space, and there's this extra dimension I can see, which is how close to a solution they are. And not only did they have these mental images, but they were stoppably dynamic, so they could run them forward a bit and see what happened, and then reverse a bit like a debugger. So cool. A second area is specialist interest. So I'm not going to talk about me for a minute. I'm going to talk about an amazing artist called Chris. So I first came across Chris's work at a Comic-Con, because I'm like Comic-Con, so I'm a bit of a geek. And I was walking past this, and I particularly like Doctor Who. And so I stopped and looked at these pictures, and the person behind the counter said, "Oh, my son drew these." Up until then, I thought they were photos. So I said, "Wow." And he said, yeah, my son's autistic. And so I was like, "Oh, tell me all about it." So Chris stopped going to school at about 12 or 13 because school couldn't really cope with him at all, didn't know what to do with him. I don't know about America, but in the UK, it's getting a little better, but we have a very defined view of how children should be in school. And so he shut himself in his bedroom and he drew for about 2 years. And after about 2 years, he walked out of his bedroom with this and showed it to his dad. Wow. I want to show you something. So this is his special interest. And now he's got so interested in colours and shading and techniques that he does this. And, oh, is this going to work? No, this is the coolest thing ever, and the pictures haven't rendered properly. Now I'm really sad. I'll have to try and explain it, which isn't going to be anywhere near as cool. Sorry. In my bag, I'll plug my laptop in. At some point during the next day or two, I will show you this, okay, because it's incredible.
We'll get it tweeted out.
Yeah, we'll get it tweeted out.
Hashtag devopsdays.
Yeah. So what Chris has started doing is hand drawing negatives. So he draws pictures that look like they're almost entirely white, okay? And then if you completely change the color contrast on your phone and look at them, they are the most detailed pencil drawings. They're like realistic style pencil drawings. So I'll try and show you that.
Did you get it, Claire?
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that
right.
later. We'll do that later. I will show you because it's absolutely incredible. And his work's actually being shown being displayed in the Senate at the moment. So that's Chris. And none of the pictures are rendered. And so my special interests sometimes persist, like Chris's, and sometimes subside a little. And my specialist interests, my favourite things at the moment, are things like space and Lego. And work-wise, Wardley mapping makes me so happy. Chris will absolutely attest to the fact that when we did Wardley mapping at the workshop, I kept singing. I even made up a Wardley mapping song because I was so happy and it was so nice. I really, really like putting some logic into the chaos, about the chaos of the world. So exciting. And coding. Although I've only just started coding again after a break of, many more than 10 years since I had coded commercially, and I'm definitely not pretending to be good again quite yet. But the team that I'm working for, just say my enthusiasm has totally perked up. The team has kind of reinvigorated them. Because for me, that's what's my special interest, how it kind of manifests to me that something is a special interest, is it just makes me so, so happy. And my other special interest at the moment is I have a T2 1971 Westphalia VW camper van that I've made into a Tank Girl van, because I love Tank Girl very much. And I love it so much that even though I've got a perfectly nice house, I still have to quite often go and sleep in it in the driveway. And in case you're wondering what that does to my family life, my kids think it's brilliant, and they come and sleep in it with me in the driveway often too. And that's what I really want to express, is some of the joy of some of this stuff. So sensory processing differences as well. You know, we can have sensors that are calibrated somewhat differently, so sensitivities that are different to light, to sound, to any of the senses. And most often, so yes, I often wear sunglasses somewhere if there are bright lights. Yes, I've got noise-cancelling headphones, which I kind of like because they're silver and they make me look like a Cyberman as well. And I don't do well in shopping centres, and I don't like amusement arcades. And when I went to Vegas, my husband was worried that someone would find me curled up in a ball on the floor and have to rescue me. It's like, please tell me someone will be with you at all times. But what you don't often hear is the joy of, you know, when you look outside and the trees are swaying and the leaves are kind of dancing, I can sometimes physically feel that on my skin to the extent where I forget what I'm talking about because I can't stop giggling. I've got a dress that's blue velvet, and when I look down at it, it reminds me of the night sky, and it feels so good I can feel it without even touching it. And I have to not look down when I'm wearing it too much because I get distracted. It's just such a joy. And repetitive tasks are one thing that I, you know, and plenty of other autistic folks find really calming. So if I'm struggling to socialise at a party or something, I tend to go and do the washing up. I quite like sorting socks. We've got a box where we put all our socks that don't have friends that come out of the washing machine without their buddies. And I like sorting socks or sorting laundry. And it's helped me at work as well, liking repetitive tasks. I worked somewhere once where we had a bug queue. And the bug queue was always about 110 to 130 things on it and never went down. And people didn't like working on the bug queue. But I loved the bug queue. And eventually they let me work on it all the time. Because no one else wanted to do it, really. Do you know what? And I liked it. It was like these little logic puzzles. And every time you solved one, the number went down. And I loved that. And by the time I'd finished working on the bug queue after a couple of months, it sat at 2 items that we couldn't reproduce. And besides that, repetitive tasks are helpful because for my PhD, I transcribed and analysed 14,866 sentences of pair programmer dialogue to see how pair programming works. And found, you know what? Experts talk less than novices. So collaboration isn't all about this noisy, busy stuff that we thought it was about. And Catherine and I started this inclusive collaboration campaign, and we've been doing experiments and raising awareness. And again, the photos haven't rendered for some reason. But we've been running experiments at conferences and also privately in organisations, one of which is called the Silence Experiment, where we work entirely in silence for an hour and a half in groups. And we decided early on that we always wanted there to be a charitable outcome from the experiments that we did. And the ones that we do at conferences for the Silence Experiment is we make prosthetic hands for predominantly landmine victims in the third world. Over the last year and a half, we've made about 50 prosthetic hands. That's annoying. I've got lovely photos of people with them. But anyway, we've also been doing sensory experiments. And in the sensory experiment, the photo that you can't see is people wearing very funny glasses because we look at how do different sensory conditions feel. How does it feel when the lights are dimmed or the lights are brighter? Which do you prefer? And which, you know, what are the outcomes when you work in different sensory conditions? And again, we're running a few more in the next year, and then we're going to publish some results. And again, we made our output charitable So in the sensory experiment that we last ran, Chris came and helped, we made 400 overnight care packs for homeless people. And my favourite thing about that was when I went to drop them off, it's the astonishing things that touch, isn't it? When I went to drop them off, the guy at the centre said, "What's in each bag?" And I said, "Soap and a flannel and a bunch of other stuff and a comb." And he was like, "Oh, they'll have your hand off for a comb in here." And I hadn't even thought for a homeless person to not have a comb was such a massive thing. I really hadn't thought. It was like, they have to share combs at the moment and they hate it. So having a personal comb is amazing. So what I really want to impress on you, as well as all the inclusivity stuff, is if you're running workshops at conferences, in your organisations or at all, it's really, really easy to repurpose them so that the output, rather than a Lego model, even though that's really fun, rather than a Lego model, is something for social good that you can get out into your community to help people. It's not difficult at all to do that. And what I find is people engage in the activity so much more as well. I'm also running my own personal experiment. I'm actually not so worried that you can't see the photo here, because the photo here is of my little coding nook in my house. So I'm working with a remote team, which is a team at Cucumber Limited. And we have everybody works remotely and we mob program. And so that's been a bit of an experiment for me because I didn't know how I was going to get on mobbing and didn't know how I was going to get on working remotely. And I've managed, one of the most beautiful things about it is that I'm able to create an environment for myself to work in that is uniquely and completely tailored to the conditions that I need that day. So I'm in my office is in a little cupboard, but it's supposed to be an office cupboard. I'm not just in a cupboard. It's nice and enclosed. There are kind of wooden bits at the side. There's a wall directly behind me. I have my favourite chair I can sit on, which is kind of velvety as well. Oh, that's really nice, actually. Good. Lovely. Oh, that's so nice. Can you turn them down again? And I can turn the sound off. I can mute myself. I can walk away really easily. And my very favourite thing, apart from the mobbing itself, which is amazing and the team are incredible, my favourite thing about it is when it's break time and people say, "Let's have a coffee," I don't have to socialise. I can turn the screen off and just go away, and there's no one apart from my dog and sometimes my husband, although he's a writer, so he's kind of usually in his little nook writing as well. And I'm astounded how many tech companies I go into and they say, "This is our breakout space where we have rest time." And I'm like, "What's there?" "Oh, well, we've got a ping pong table and a bunch of other stuff that you have to do with other people." I'm like, "How is that rest?" I want to be able to go away and do something quiet. Okay, I've run over time a little bit. So I just want to say that I also wrote a book that's available on LeanPub. It's free of charge. You can contribute towards the campaign if you want to, but if you want the book and you don't have the means to do that, by all means, please just take it free of charge. It's not going to tell you how to solve any of this stuff. It is just literally a set of experiments that you can do. And if nothing else, I hope dearly that I've encouraged you to think about inclusivity in your workplace, to run some experiments, and also to maybe experiment with how can you create workshops and activities that are for social good. That's it. Thank you very much.